If it's in a word or it's in a look, you can't get rid of the Babadook. Honestly, I can't praise this film highly enough. It got to me as a horror fan, as a subtext junkie, and weirdly enough, as a former children's librarian. Maybe I should go back and read that book for story time. What's great about The Babadook is that it never insults the audience by spelling out its intentions, presenting us instead with a film that's satisfying on many levels. It's art, it's subject to interpretation, and, if you let it in, it'll let your imagination run wild. I asked myself one simple question: what is The Babadook? And came up with 5 possible answers. I'd love to hear more, so if you have your own theories, please leave them in the comments. And before we start, yes, there will be spoilers. Number 1. The Babadook is the big bad wolf. Here we'll be looking at the story within the story as it compares with traditional folklore and fairy tales. A rumbling sound, then 3 sharp knocks. Babadook, dook, dook. That's when you know that he's around. You'll see him if you look. As a classic storybook villain, the Babadook works extremely well. His concept and design are timeless. He taps into our fear of the unknown, lurking in the shadows in our bedrooms when we feel the most vulnerable. Dark, menacing, and grinning maniacally, he's how many of us pictured the thing that goes bump, or rather dook, in the night. The character of Mr. Babadook first appears in a storybook with pop-up pages containing pure nightmare fuel. In the manner of Freddy Krueger and the Gentleman, his tale is told in a nursery rhyme, which never fails to boost the creep factor. Like all good fables, it uses the rule of 3 by predicting 3 deaths, all at the hand of our protagonist Amelia. She's shown killing her dog, her son Samuel, and finally, herself. Yet even these disturbing elements are not that far removed from their traditional counterparts. Fairy tales can be surprisingly dark when they've not been sugar-coated or told by Disney. Seriously, read them again. You'll find murder, cannibalism, suicide, paedophile wolves... No, the other one. Mass child abduction, evil sisters getting their eyes pecked out, and... oh my god, poor Sleeping Beauty. But these stories weren't just written to frighten kids. Many were cautionary tales designed to keep children safe in the real world. Mr. Babadook might traumatise Samuel when he first hears it, but the book warns him of the danger and helps him recognise the threatening presence in the house. He eventually uses this knowledge to save his mother and himself. Amelia reads her son another bedtime story, The 3 Little Pigs. Now, let's compare the Babadook to the big bad wolf. Both prey on the weak and destroy the safety of their homes, literally with the wolf, psychologically in the case of the Babadook. Both demand, let me in. Both make an entrance through a chimney, and both villains are eventually thwarted by a combination of strength and cunning. The cunning comes from Sam, who pulls off a sleight of hand trick to avoid his sedatives, and he uses homemade traps and weapons to subdue his possessed mother. As for Amelia, she might as well be made of straw in the beginning, but once she confronts her fears, she's a house of bricks. In the end, strength and cunning work together, and the Babadook is finally banished. And they all live happily ever after. Sort of. Except for the dog. In this scenario, the book is a warning device that helps protect the family. But what if the opposite were true? Number 2. The Babadook is a demon that lives inside a cursed book. What if reading the poem released an evil spirit that began looking for a host? Just like when little Reagan made a friend on the Ouija board. His name is Mr. Babadook, and this is his book. From H.P. Lovecraft to the Evil Dead movies, we know that while books nourish the mind and tell much love stories, they sometimes have the unfortunate side effect of unleashing hell. What can I say? Some books are just pure evil. When Mr. Babadook is introduced to the story, Amelia has never seen the book before. How did it come to be in her son's shelf? Did it just appear one day by magic, or did somebody give him the worst Christmas present ever? We get no clues from the book itself. We see no imprint, publisher logo, copyright information, acknowledgements, or date. Its origins are completely shrouded in mystery. Anyone could have written it at any time. It could be years, decades, even centuries old. Once the book is read aloud, the demon is released. He dabbles in some poltergeist activity, scaring the family before taking possession of the mother. But let's take another look at the two versions of the book. The first one shows the Babadook haunting a small boy, but in the second version it's a woman. Perhaps the demon originally targeted Sam. He's young and easy to frighten, but he's also defiant and determined to fight monsters. Sam's seizure might have even been him resisting demonic possession. But there's another potential victim, Sam's emotionally unstable mother. This time, the demon succeeds because the victim insists that there is no Babadook. And how can she defend herself against something she doesn't believe in? Remember, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. The demonic possession theory is a fascinating one because it inspires its own lore. Has the book been in other houses? Are there more copies out there with more demons lurking within? Do the final pages change for every reader? Have the tragic events always played out as written? And has Amelia seen this already? Think back to the news report she watches on TV, the one where she sees her own face. She's delirious and her perception is questionable, but the broadcast feels so vivid. Maybe she's remembering something she watched in the past. If that's true, did the Babadook do it? Does he always attack children right before their 7th birthday? Does he make each death look like a murder, a suicide, or an accident? Let's hope we never find out in a series of crappy sequels. Here's another thought. Maybe Sam found the book among his father's belongings. That's one explanation. Its previous owner might even be the author. Musical instruments suggest that he was artistic, creative. Or maybe there's a stronger connection. Number 3. The Babadook is the ghost of Amelia's husband, Oskar. I'll soon take off my funny disguise. Take heed of what you've read. And once you see what's underneath, you're going to wish you were dead. According to the rhyme, Mr. Babadook is merely a disguise for something more sinister. The other apparition, Oskar, could be considered its true form. Once Amelia sees what's underneath, she wishes they could be together again, and, well, there's only one way that can happen. Whether or not she realises, Amelia is wishing for death, just like the poem said. The book first appears after Sam plays in the basement, the same room where the monster is eventually banished, and where it lingers on after the final conflict, eating worms. Yum. Significantly, this is also the room where Oskar's possessions are stored, and it's quite possible that they've been left undisturbed for nearly 7 years. Other visual hints include Oskar's hat and coat on the peg, as well as this poster seen at the beginning of the film. So if the Babadook is Oskar, why is he tormenting his own family? Maybe the separation from his loved ones drove him to insanity. Maybe he's jealous of Sam for taking his place, or of Amelia, who gets to be with the child he never even got to hold. Maybe he blames them for his death, or maybe he just yearns for his family so much that he plans to reunite them. Another thought, we know who Oskar was, but we have no idea what he was like as a person. Maybe Amelia feels haunted by him because she felt threatened by him in life. It would explain her reactions to Sam. She's terrified by his aggression and flinches even when he tries to touch her out of affection. Is she afraid he's becoming like his father? To be honest, that one feels like a bit of a stretch. But here's the thing. Once Oskar's spirit possesses Amelia, she becomes the abuser. She does everything she can to hurt Sam both physically and emotionally. She's furious when he calls for help and even cuts the phone line. She stalks him through the house while he hides, afraid that his own mother is trying to kill him. Possessed Amelia reminds me of another character, Jack Torrance from The Shining. He wasn't exactly Father of the Year, but he was definitely a fan of the Big Bad Wolf. So far, we've been working on the assumption that supernatural forces are present in the Babadook. It's a work of fiction, so that's all well and good. But what happens when we look for a more rational explanation? Number 4. The Babadook was Amelia all along. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. In this theory, we look at a psychological thriller where our main character is both the mother and the monster. You start to change when I get in, the Babadook growing right under your skin. Before we question Amelia's motives, we must account for strange events that occur around the house. But remember, there are constant references to illusion and trickery, plus her witnesses are, at best, unreliable. Sam has such strength in his convictions that it seems absurd to deny the supernatural, but I think we can agree he's a very impressionable young boy. Before he even hears about the Babadook, he sees monsters everywhere. Later, he becomes obsessed with the story, lashing out at non-believers, and he even has a fit due to his brain overheating. His wild imagination leaves him highly suggestible. As for Amelia, we know she's experiencing full-blown hallucinations thanks to the amazing disappearing cockroaches. This throws everything she sees into question. So we're left with two unreliable witnesses coping with anxiety, sleep deprivation, and feeding into each other's paranoid delusions. And there's no one else around during the haunting scenes to act as a voice of reason. How do we know what's going on? To find out, let's delve deeper into the minds of our characters. Sam can't actually see the Babadook, he only hears it when it speaks through his mother, and he hears some pretty heavy stuff for a 6-year-old. His belief in the monster might be a defence mechanism that helps him avoid the unthinkable. If his mother doesn't love him, it's because the Babadook won't let her. If his mother is shouting abuse, it's the Babadook talking, not her. As for the scenes where Sam is being violently thrown around by an unseen force, well, maybe things didn't happen quite like that. Again, the Babadook hurt me, not my mum. Likewise, the monster persona is a convenient way for Amelia to distance herself from feelings she can't handle. As a mother, and a single parent no less, it's her duty to love and care for her child. Still, she's only human and Sam doesn't make life easy. We see her son's obnoxious behaviour and constant need for attention, all the while watching the suffering on Amelia's face. He breaks things, gets in trouble at school, and pushes little girls out of tree houses. He even acts the brat when the nice man from his mum's work brings him a present. We get the feeling that this is what Amelia has to put up with every single day. If only she had some way to vent. Let's look at the glass in the soup, the photo on the bed, and most importantly, the Mr. Babadook storybook. If there's no ghost, then who's responsible? Could Sam be doing this to prove the existence of the Babadook, indulging his monster fantasies, and getting an excuse to cling to his mother? It makes sense that he'd want to. But while he could have tampered with the food and the photograph, I doubt he was the one behind the book. Even if he did find it in the basement, hide it on a shelf, and after it was thrown away, managed to sneak out to the bin and glue the pages back together, I doubt that even the brightest 6-year-old could have created those last few pages. And remember, those had to be added overnight. That leaves one other person. What's interesting is that each of these acts relate to some earlier scene of Sam's disobedience. The glass was probably from the window he broke. The photograph appeared when he got into trouble for playing in the basement. Storybooks are read when Sam won't go to sleep and wakes up his mother in the middle of the night. Is the Babadook Amelia's own brand of parental punishment? Because I think the naughty step might be a bit less dramatic. Let's look back at the scene where the storybook reappears on the doorstep. There's evidence that Amelia created those pages herself. At the birthday party, it's revealed that she was once a writer whose work included children's material. Then there's the substance we see on her hands after the book is destroyed. Is that ash from the burnt pages? Or charcoal, the same drawing material used in the illustrations? But hang on, how did she make those last pages without knowing? Did she forget she was up all night making evil pop-ups? We know she's in a fragile mental state and getting worse. Her sleep deprivation is chronic and she's reaching the point where she can't tell what's real and what isn't. She could be developing a split personality, having blackouts, or engaging in somnambulistic activities. That opens the door for all kinds of strange behaviour. I've actually seen this before in another movie, which I won't name in case of spoilers, but for those who already know, let's just say his name is Robert Paulson. So here's the big question. Why on earth would a grown woman create a monster, then trick herself into thinking it's real? Personally, I think the Babadook was a way for Amelia to separate herself from her own negative emotions so that she could concentrate on being a good mother. But if we recall the story of Jekyll and Hyde, we know this practice doesn't end well. I can see why she'd want to express those dark feelings through art and literature. Many people do this and find it therapeutic. But her problems are too deep and too horrifying to face alone, her mind too unstable, so she denies the truth to the point where reality becomes distorted and her dark side is out of control. It's possible that Amelia wrote the book as a warning, either to Sam or to herself. She knows that Sam will believe the story, plus he holds the optimistic view that monsters are real and they can be defeated. Alternatively, she's trying to warn herself about her own violent impulses. In that case, she almost succeeds, as the last pages scare her into seeking help. It's just a shame that the people she reaches out to aren't very sympathetic. True, there's no stalker involved, but there is a very lonely, very frightened woman who desperately needs to talk to someone, not just for her own sake, but for the sake of her child. In the end, Amelia overcomes her dark side by understanding it. She faces her demons and learns to pacify those ugly thoughts, as symbolised by the bowl of worms. But she'll never forget how dangerously close to the edge she once came. So far, we've been trying to explain what the Babadook literally is. But for our final trick, let's take a dive into the abstract. Number 5. The Babadook is a metaphor for repressed emotions and/or mental illness. I'll wager with you. I'll make you a bet. The more you deny, the stronger I get. Repression, the linchpin of all great horror. Villains are often symbolic of feelings and impulses we'd rather ignore, and the Babadook is no exception. Possibly, he even stands for repression itself. He is everything you fear and every horrible thought that refuses to be ignored. But what else specifically could he stand for? Anxiety. This is actually cited as the reason for Sam's seizure and is taken seriously enough to prescribe him medication. So if it's been diagnosed in the film, why is it on the repression list? Because it's not just Sam who's suffering, it's his mother, only she's pushing her own problems aside. Anxiety is characterised by insomnia, feelings of dread, irritability, and social withdrawal, all shown in Amelia. It can create a downward spiral where the more stressed a person becomes, the worse the anxiety gets, till the person suffers a breakdown. The whole film works as an allegory for this. Grief. Amelia is suffering with the pain of bereavement. According to the wiki page, the Babadook film follows the 5 stages of the grieving process. We start with denial. She tells her sister she's over Oskar's death because she never mentions him anymore. Then there's anger, when she yells at Sam and snaps at the party guests. Then fear grows as they sense the evil presence in the house. Bargaining happens when Oskar says they can be together if she brings him the boy. Finally, acceptance is achieved when she forces herself to watch him die. Remember, you can't get rid of the Babadook. Amelia will always miss her husband, and grief will forever be a part of her. However, she's undergone a healing process that will help her regain control of her life. Sexual repression. While not the focus of the film, there are definite examples of this. Amelia watches happy couples on TV or having public displays in cars, and her gaze lingers before reality slaps her back to earth. 7 years after losing her husband, romantic affection must be a distant memory for her, but still, a woman has needs. Sadly, her potential romantic interest is sent packing after Sam's tantrum, and he even bursts in on her during, private time. It gives new meaning to the phrase, buzzkill. Depression. It wouldn't be the first time I've seen this visualised as an oppressive, all-consuming black shadow. While depression can happen for any reason, or sometimes no reason at all, Amelia is vulnerable because of everything that's happened to her. Given that she was widowed right before giving birth, it's likely that she also suffered from postnatal depression. Once again, depression is not something that you simply get rid of, but hopefully it's something manageable. From the final scenes, it's clear that there will be good days and bad days ahead for Amelia. We see her on a good day, so there's that sense of cautious optimism. Anger. There are moments when Amelia expresses feelings of resentment towards Sam. That doesn't mean she doesn't love him, far from it, but the parent-child relationship is a complex one. There's something uncomfortable about how this is portrayed. It's what Freud would call the unheimlich, something that's unsettling because it's so close to home. The audience is put in Amelia's shoes when Sam is being difficult. In fact, I've lost count of how many comments I've seen from people wanting to punch him in the face. And while we know that would be wrong, the sheer frustration is something that all parents have to endure, and that we've all been the cause of at some point. None of us were angels, but we don't like being reminded of it. When the Babadook appears, all of that repressed anger comes flooding to the surface, and it's easy to see why. Often we get a sanitised version of motherhood. If you're not smiling sweetly and loving every glorious moment, then you're a failure and a horrible person. So you deny the angry thoughts and lock them away in the basement until, before you know it, you've created a monster. And that's what happens to Amelia. So that's the Babadook. It's a fairy tale, a demonic possession, a ghost story, a psychological thriller, and an extended metaphor. Ultimately, it's what the viewer makes of it, but it's all valid, and each theory gives us even more ideas to explore. In a genre saturated with jump scares and torture porn, it's refreshing to see something so well put together. For me, it's a new horror classic. Thanks for listening, and please, don't have nightmares.